There comes a moment in life when a person grows tired, not from work, not from struggle, not even from disappointment, but from carrying the weight of other people's expectations. A moment when the heart asks a quiet question: how much of my life have I spent trying to be accepted by people who were never responsible for my happiness? We are taught, in ways both loud and subtle, to seek approval. We learn to measure ourselves through applause, through compliments, through the nods and smiles of others. We begin to believe that our worth lies outside of us, resting in the hands of strangers, friends, family, and crowds that change their minds as quickly as the wind changes direction. And so we bend, we shrink, we perform, we become actors in stories we did not write, hoping someone will tell us we are enough. But what if freedom begins the day you stop asking for permission to be yourself? What if the greatest relationship you will ever build is not with another person, but with your own soul? What if the silence you fear is not empty at all, but filled with the sound of your own wisdom waiting to be heard? Living alone is not the same as being abandoned. Detachment is not the same as becoming cold. There is a difference between isolation and independence. One is a prison built by fear. The other is a home built by self-respect. To live alone, when necessary, is to discover that your spirit can stand upright without being held by constant approval. It is to understand that loneliness often disappears when you stop running from yourself. The world will always have opinions. It will always have judgments, expectations, and demands. Some people will praise you today and misunderstand you tomorrow. Some will celebrate your success but question your growth. If you build your identity upon their voices, your peace will rise and fall with every word they speak. But there is another way to live, a way that begins when you stop chasing validation and start listening to the quiet truth within. A way that teaches you that your value was never something another person could give you, and therefore never something they can take away. And when you finally understand that, you step into a kind of freedom that no rejection can touch and no approval can improve. The need for approval often enters a person's life so quietly that it feels natural. It begins in childhood, when praise becomes associated with being loved, accepted, and valued. A child learns that good grades earn smiles, obedience earns approval, and fitting in brings a sense of belonging. There is nothing unusual about this desire. Human beings are social creatures, and connection matters. The problem begins when approval stops being something appreciated and becomes something required. What starts as a simple wish to be accepted slowly transforms into a dependency that shapes decisions, behaviors, and even identity. Many people spend years adjusting themselves to match the expectations of others. They change the way they speak, the dreams they pursue, the clothes they wear, and the opinions they express. They become experts at reading the room, sensing what others want, and delivering it. On the surface, this may appear successful. They receive compliments, recognition, and acceptance. Yet beneath that acceptance often lives a quiet exhaustion. The effort required to constantly manage how others perceive you is immense. It demands continuous performance, and performance is never the same as authenticity. The hidden cost of seeking approval is the gradual loss of self. Every time a person silences their truth to avoid criticism, they move a little farther away from who they are. Every time they say yes when they want to say no, they teach themselves that other people's comfort matters more than their own honesty. Every time they sacrifice their values for acceptance, they exchange a piece of their identity for temporary validation. The exchange may seem small in the moment, but over time it accumulates. Approval is also unstable because it depends on factors outside your control. People's opinions change. Their expectations shift. What earns praise today may attract criticism tomorrow. If your self-worth depends on their reactions, your emotional state becomes fragile. You rise when they approve of you and fall when they do not. Your confidence becomes tied to circumstances that can never be fully predicted or managed. This creates a life filled with anxiety because there is always another audience to impress and another standard to meet. Perhaps the most painful cost is the fear that develops alongside this dependency, the fear of disappointing others, the fear of rejection, the fear of standing alone. These fears can become so powerful that they prevent growth. A person may avoid pursuing meaningful goals because someone might disagree. They may remain in unhealthy relationships because leaving could invite judgment. They may hide their talents, beliefs, or ambitions because authenticity carries the risk of criticism. Yet no amount of approval can permanently satisfy a person who has never learned to value themselves. External validation acts like a temporary remedy rather than a lasting foundation. It offers a brief feeling of security, but the feeling fades quickly, creating the need for more praise, more recognition, and more reassurance. The cycle continues because the real issue was never the absence of approval from others. The real issue was the absence of trust in one's own worth, a worth that exists long before anyone applauds, agrees, admires, or approves. Many people fear being alone, not because solitude itself is painful, but because they have been taught to believe that their value depends on constant connection. From an early age, society often presents companionship as proof of success, popularity as evidence of worth, and attention as a sign of importance. As a result, being alone can feel uncomfortable at first, not because something is wrong, but because the silence removes the distractions that usually keep a person from facing themselves. Yet learning to enjoy your own company is one of the most powerful forms of freedom a person can develop. Being alone gives you the opportunity to meet the person you become when nobody is watching. Without the influence of expectations, comparisons, or social pressures, you begin to discover your genuine interests, values, and desires. You learn what brings you peace, what inspires you, and what truly matters to you. Many people spend years surrounded by others without ever developing a meaningful relationship with themselves. They know how to entertain friends, support family members, and satisfy coworkers, yet they struggle to sit quietly with their own thoughts. Solitude changes that. At first, the experience may feel unfamiliar. The absence of constant conversation, messages, and social interaction can create a sense of emptiness. However, that emptiness often serves as a doorway rather than a destination. Once the noise fades, deeper awareness begins to emerge. You notice your thoughts more clearly. You recognize patterns in your emotions. You gain insight into fears, dreams, and habits that might otherwise remain hidden beneath daily distractions. Solitude becomes a place of self-discovery rather than isolation. There is also a profound difference between loneliness and enjoying your own company. Loneliness is the feeling that something essential is missing. It is often accompanied by a sense of disconnection and longing. Enjoying your own company, on the other hand, comes from feeling complete within yourself. It does not mean rejecting relationships or avoiding people. It means understanding that your sense of fulfillment is not entirely dependent on another person's presence. You can appreciate companionship without needing it to define your happiness. When a person becomes comfortable being alone, they develop a stronger sense of emotional independence. They no longer rush into relationship simply to escape solitude. They become more selective about the people they allow into their lives because they are not motivated by fear of being alone. They understand that a peaceful evening in their own company is far more valuable than surrounding themselves with people who drain their energy or compromise their self-respect. Solitude also creates space for growth. It allows time for reflection, creativity, learning, and personal development. Some of life's most important realizations arrive during moments of quiet. Without constant external influence, your own voice becomes easier to hear. The opinions of others lose some of their power because you begin to trust your own judgment. The approval of the crowd becomes less important when you have learned to enjoy your own presence and appreciate your own thoughts. In that space, confidence grows naturally, not from attention or admiration, but from the simple realization that your company is enough. One of the greatest challenges in life is discovering who you truly are beneath the layers of expectations placed upon you by family, friends, society, and culture. From the moment people begin to interact with the world, they receive messages about who they should become. Some are told to be quieter. Others are encouraged to be stronger, more agreeable, more ambitious, or more accommodating. Over time, these expectations can become so deeply woven into a person's identity that they no longer know where their true self ends and other people's opinions begin. Reclaiming your identity starts with recognizing how much of your life has been shaped by voices that were never your own. Many people spend years trying to become the version of themselves that others find acceptable. They pursue careers that earn admiration rather than fulfillment. They adopt beliefs that keep them included rather than challenged. They hide parts of themselves that may invite criticism and exaggerate qualities that receive praise. This process often happens gradually, making it difficult to notice. The desire to belong is powerful, and sometimes people sacrifice authenticity in exchange for acceptance without realizing the cost. The result is a life that may appear successful on the outside, but feels disconnected on the inside. The opinions of others can become a kind of invisible mirror. Instead of looking inward to understand who they are, people begin looking outward to see how they are being perceived. They judge themselves according to reactions, compliments, approval, and criticism. Their self-image rises and falls based on external feedback. When praised, they feel worthy. When criticized, they question themselves. In this way, their identity becomes something that is constantly negotiated with the world rather than something rooted within it. Reclaiming your identity requires the courage to step away from that mirror. It means asking difficult questions. What do I truly value? What do I believe when nobody is influencing me? What dreams belong to me, and which ones were inherited from the expectations of others? These questions are not always comfortable because they require honesty. Sometimes the answers reveal that certain goals, relationships, or habits have been maintained not out of genuine desire, but out of fear of disappointing others. As people begin this process, they often encounter resistance. Not everyone will welcome the changes that come with authenticity. Some individuals become uncomfortable when a person stops seeking approval and starts making independent choices. Those who benefited from compliance may question new boundaries. Others may misunderstand the desire for self-discovery as selfishness. Yet personal growth often requires disappointing expectations that were never aligned with your true nature. Identity becomes stronger when it is built on self-awareness rather than public opinion. A person who knows who they are does not need constant reassurance from others. They understand that disagreement does not erase their value, and criticism does not define their character. They are able to listen to feedback without becoming controlled by it. Their decisions are guided by principles instead of popularity. The process of reclaiming your identity is not about rejecting everyone around you or refusing all influence. It is about ensuring that your life reflects your deepest values rather than the demands of the crowd. It is about recognizing that your voice deserves a place among all the other voices competing for your attention. When you stop allowing other people's opinions to write your story, you begin creating a life that feels honest, meaningful, and unmistakably your own. True confidence is often misunderstood. Many people believe confidence is the ability to impress others, command attention, or receive admiration. They associate it with popularity, achievement, or the approval of those around them. But confidence built upon external praise is fragile because it depends on conditions that can change at any moment. If compliments disappear, if success fades, or if criticism arrives, that confidence can quickly begin to crumble. Genuine confidence is different. It is not something granted by the world. It is something developed within. It remains steady because it is rooted in self-trust rather than public opinion. Building inner confidence begins with accepting the fact that not everyone will understand, agree with, or appreciate you. This realization can feel uncomfortable at first because many people spend years trying to avoid disapproval. They carefully manage their words, actions, and choices in an effort to maintain acceptance. Yet the more they attempt to satisfy everyone, the more they lose touch with themselves. Inner confidence grows when a person stops making universal approval their goal and starts making authenticity their priority. One of the foundations of confidence is keeping promises to yourself. Every time you follow through on a commitment, no matter how small, you strengthen trust in your own character. When you say you will learn a new skill, establish a healthy habit, or pursue a meaningful goal, and then take action, you send a powerful message to yourself. You prove that your words have value. Confidence is not built by waiting to feel ready. It is built through repeated evidence that you can rely on yourself. Another important element is learning to separate mistakes from identity. People who depend heavily on external validation often see failure as proof that they are inadequate. A setback becomes a personal judgment rather than a learning experience. Inner confidence approaches failure differently. It understands that mistakes are part of growth. Instead of asking, "What does this failure say about me?" confident individuals ask, "What can this teach me?" This shift creates resilience because self-worth is no longer attached to perfect outcomes. Inner confidence also develops when a person becomes comfortable with their imperfections. No human being is flawless. Everyone carries weaknesses, fears, and limitations. Yet many people spend enormous energy trying to hide these realities. They fear that exposing imperfections will reduce their value in the eyes of others. Ironically, confidence grows when people stop fighting to appear perfect and start accepting themselves honestly. Self-acceptance creates a sense of stability that external praise can never provide. There is strength in knowing your values and standing by them, even when doing so invites criticism. A confident person does not change their principles to fit every situation or please every audience. They listen to others, remain open to learning, and consider different perspectives, but they do not abandon their core beliefs simply to gain approval. Their sense of direction comes from within rather than from the shifting opinions of the crowd. As confidence deepens, a person becomes less dependent on reassurance. Compliments remain pleasant, but they are no longer necessary for self-respect. Recognition becomes appreciated rather than required. The individual begins to understand that their worth is not determined by applause, popularity, or validation from others. It comes from knowing who they are, trusting their judgment, honoring their values, and believing in their ability to face life's challenges with courage and integrity. Peace is often searched for in places where it cannot permanently live. Many people believe it will arrive when they are fully accepted, endlessly admired, or surrounded by people who never disappoint them. They imagine that happiness depends on finding the right relationship, receiving enough praise, or achieving a level of success that silences all doubt. Yet experience teaches a different lesson. No amount of approval can guarantee peace, because peace is not created by controlling the world around you. It is created by changing your relationship with it. This is where emotional detachment becomes a powerful source of freedom, self-respect, and inner calm. Emotional detachment is frequently misunderstood. Some assume it means becoming cold, distant, or indifferent. Others believe it requires withdrawing from relationships and shutting down emotions. In reality, healthy detachment is neither rejection nor avoidance. It is the ability to care without becoming controlled. It is the ability to love people without making them responsible for your identity. It is the ability to participate in life without allowing every opinion, criticism, or disappointment to determine your emotional state. When people become emotionally attached to validation, they surrender a portion of their freedom. Their mood begins to depend on how others respond to them. A compliment creates happiness, while criticism creates distress. Acceptance brings confidence, while rejection creates insecurity. Over time, this dependence places enormous power in the hands of others. The individual becomes vulnerable to every change in opinion, every misunderstanding, and every moment of disapproval. Life starts to feel like an endless effort to protect self-worth from external judgment. Detachment breaks this cycle. It teaches a person that they can appreciate approval without needing it. They can value relationships without losing themselves within them. They can listen to criticism without allowing it to define their identity. This shift creates emotional stability because self-worth is no longer tied to forces outside their control. The opinions of others become information rather than commands. They can be considered, evaluated, and sometimes learned from, but they no longer possess the authority to determine personal value. One of the greatest gifts of detachment is freedom. When a person stops seeking validation everywhere they go, they gain the courage to make choices based on conviction rather than approval. They become willing to pursue goals that matter to them, even when others fail to understand. They feel less pressure to perform, impress, or constantly prove themselves. Decisions become clearer because they are guided by values rather than fear of judgment. Detachment also strengthens self-respect. A person who respects themselves understands that their worth is not something to be negotiated. They do not beg for acceptance, chase attention, or remain in relationships where they are repeatedly diminished. They recognize that self-respect requires boundaries. It requires the willingness to walk away from situations that demand the sacrifice of dignity in exchange for belonging. This does not come from arrogance, but from a healthy understanding of personal value. As emotional dependence fades, a deeper peace begins to emerge. The mind becomes quieter because it is no longer consumed by endless concerns about what others think. Energy once spent seeking approval can now be invested in growth, creativity, purpose, and self-discovery. Life becomes less about earning worth and more about expressing it. In that freedom, a person discovers that peace was never hidden in the opinions of others, but waiting within the moment they chose to release the need for constant validation.